The sweltering July heat of Austin, Texas, bounced off the cracked asphalt of the parking lot, waves of distorted air rising like ghosts from the ground. Inside the SUV, the air conditioning unit groaned under the strain, feebly blowing a lukewarm, metallic-smelling breeze that did little to cool the sweat dampening the back of Audrey's neck. She sat motionless, her hands still gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles showed a bloodless white. She had just survived a grueling 12-hour shift at the Austin Medical Center's emergency room. A chaotic symphony of monitor alarms, the sharp tang of rubbing alcohol, and the heavy, exhausting scent of human pain. Her pale blue medical scrubs were wrinkled and stained with a faint blotch of antiseptic iodine, and her hair, tied back in a messy utilitarian knot, felt heavy against her scalp. She was the epitome of the invisible wife, a woman who had spent the last 15 years burning her own youth as fuel to anchor her household and build the foundation of her husband's prestigious career. Her phone, resting in the cup holder, suddenly shattered the heavy silence. It vibrated violently against the plastic, its screen illuminating the darkened cabin of the car. The caller ID read Camila. When Audrey pressed the receiver to her ear, she didn't hear the usual warm, rhythmic greeting of the woman who had cared for her home for a decade. Instead, there was only a ragged, terrified gasp. "Ma'am," Camila whispered, her voice trembling so violently that Audrey could hear the rustle of cotton fabric as the older woman huddled in the darkness of the laundry room. "Don't come home. Please, Audrey, pull over right now. Open the app. Check the living room cameras." A cold dread, sharp and sudden as a surgical blade, sliced through the exhaustion in Audrey's chest. Her body understood the danger long before her mind could process the words. She looked out the windshield. Directly across the road, the parking lot of the famous Salt Lick Barbecue was teeming with life. The rich, smoky, and sweet aroma of caramelized brisket drifted through the air vents, contrasted sharply by the laughter of families stepping out of their trucks, shielding their eyes from the blinding Texas sun. The world was moving in its normal, vibrant rhythm, yet inside Audrey's car, time seemed to freeze. With a numb thumb, she tapped the security app on her phone. The screen flickered, adjusting its resolution, and then the live stream at 11:47 a.m. materialized in high definition. Audrey's breath caught in her throat. The camera captured the interior of her own living room, bathed in the soft, diffused light filtering through the linen curtains. Standing beside the plush leather sofa was her husband, Gavin. His posture was relaxed, exuding the effortless charm of a successful certified financial planner who knew exactly how to market confidence. But his arms were wrapped tightly around the waist of another woman. It was Sienna Taylor, the high-performing, elegant pharmaceutical sales representative who frequently visited Audrey's hospital ward. Gavin leaned down and kissed Sienna slowly, a comfortable, practiced motion that carried the sickening weight of long-term familiarity. But it wasn't just the kiss that made Audrey's stomach heave. It was what Sienna was wearing. Draped over the younger woman's slender shoulders was Audrey's favorite cream cardigan. It was a heavy, cable-knit piece that Audrey kept folded in the hallway closet because Gavin always insisted on keeping the central air conditioning blasting at a freezing 18 degrees Celsius 65 degrees Fahrenheit, completely indifferent to the fact that Audrey routinely came home shivering from her exhausting night shifts. Seeing that intimate garment on a stranger felt like a physical violation. On the mahogany coffee table sat an open bottle of rare Cabernet, a prestigious, vintage bottle gifted to Audrey personally by the hospital director after she had successfully streamlined the emergency wing's operations. Gavin had uncorked it, pouring it into their crystal stemware, as if it were cheap table wine. Before Audrey could blink, the front door on the camera feed swung open. Beatrice, Audrey's mother-in-law, stepped into the living room. She was laughing, her face bright with a malicious joy, rolling a sleek blue suitcase behind her. It was the exact same suitcase Audrey had watched Beatrice pack the night before under the pretense that she and her husband, Walter, were boarding a luxury cruise to Seattle. The cruise, the flight, the tearful airport goodbye. It was all an elaborate, meticulously constructed lie designed to clear the house and create a safe haven for Gavin's infidelity. Well, Beatrice's voice cut through the phone speaker, sharp and clear. I honestly thought the saintly head nurse would insist on driving us all the way to the terminal gate. Gavin chuckled, a low, arrogant sound as he poured more wine. She never questions family. She's too busy playing the martyr at the hospital to notice anything. Sienna laughed, leaning her head against Gavin's chest, her fingers tracing the edge of the cream cardigan. In the background, Walter, the father-in-law, walked into the frame carrying a box from the garage. He looked briefly at his son and the mistress, then quietly set the box down, his face a mask of silent, submissive complicity. He knew. They all knew. The entire family had formed a unified front to deceive the woman who provided their financial stability. The sheer weight of the betrayal threatened to crush Audrey, but 22 years of managing medical crises instantly overrode her grief. In the emergency room, panic meant death, discipline meant survival. She forced her lungs to expand, inhaling the hot, stale air of the SUV. Her hands stopped shaking. She clicked the save button on the app, instantly archiving the live footage, and routed a duplicate copy to a hidden, encrypted personal email account. She switched back to the phone call. "Camila," Audrey said, her voice dropping into the steady, authoritative cadence she used when directing trauma resuscitations. "Listen to me carefully. Are you safe?" "Yes, ma'am." Camila wept softly. "They think I left after the morning cleaning." "Good. Grab your purse. Do not look back. Do not confront them. Walk out quietly through the garage door right now. This is not your fault, Camila. I am taking care of it." As Audrey hung up the phone, she turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, but she didn't put the car in reverse toward her home. Instead, she stared at the screen one last time as Gavin smiled at his mistress. He thought he was the apex predator, and he thought his wife was completely invisible. He had no idea that the head nurse had just coded the marriage, and she was about to call the time of death on his terms. The air inside the high-rise office on the 14th floor was chillingly thin, smelling faintly of expensive lemon wax and the crisp, clean scent of high-grade printer paper. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, Lady Bird Lake stretched out like a ribbon of molten green glass under the blinding Austin sun, dotted with the tiny, colorful specks of kayaks moving in slow motion. Audrey sat in a deep leather armchair that swallowed her tired frame, her fingers tracing the smooth, cool edge of the polished mahogany desk. Across from her sat Meredith Vance, a woman whose reputation in the Austin legal circuit was legendary. Meredith was in her late 50s, dressed in a sharp, charcoal gray pantsuit that looked as unyielding as armor. She didn't offer empty platitudes or generic sympathy. Instead, she leaned forward, her silver-rimmed glasses catching the harsh glare of the afternoon light, and tapped a manicured fingernail against the thick manila folder resting between them. "Infidelity is merely the smoke, Audrey," Meredith said, her voice a low, steady alto that commanded absolute attention. "As a certified financial planner, your husband knows exactly how to light a fire without leaving ashes. We are not here to investigate his morals. We are here to map his theft." The reality of those words felt like a sudden plunge into ice water, instantly washing away the residual numbness from Audrey's grueling hospital shift. Meredith opened the folder, the crisp rustle of paper sounding like autumn leaves scraping against pavement. For the next 2 hours, the room became a sterile laboratory where Gavin's meticulous cruelty was dissected under the microscope of forensic accounting. Gavin had spent the last 8 months constructing a parallel financial universe, exploiting the very trust Audrey had granted him while she was busy managing overflowing emergency wards. He had utilized his professional credentials to establish an anonymous shell company named Miller Legacy LLC, strategically registered in Delaware, a jurisdiction notorious for its ironclad privacy laws shielding business ownership. To the untrained eye, the monthly outlays from their joint accounts looked like routine investment expenses. But Meredith's financial analyst had traced the digital breadcrumbs. Gavin had been systematically bleeding their primary savings, funneling exactly $186,000 into the shell company under the fabricated guise of asset reallocation and consulting fees. Audrey's throat tightened, a bitter, dry taste rising as Meredith turned to the next page. The document displayed a high-resolution scan of a bank authorization form. Right there, on the bottom line, was Audrey's signature. The elegant, sweeping loop of the A looked almost identical to her handwriting, yet the pressure of the ink was entirely wrong. It was the mechanical, uniform imprint of a digital forgery. He liquidated the 529 college savings plan, Meredith stated flatly, her eyes locking onto Audrey's. The entire balance is gone. A sharp, physical ache bloomed behind Audrey's ribs. That wasn't just money. That fund represented 3 years of extra weekend night shifts, the agonizing hours she spent on her feet until her ankles swelled, all to ensure that her orphan niece, Lily, would have a debt-free education at nursing school. Gavin hadn't just stolen from their marriage. He had scavenged the future of a child who looked up to Audrey as a mother. The betrayal deepened with the final property, record. Meredith slid over a certified copy of a quitclaim deed filed in Burnett County. 6 weeks prior, Gavin had quietly transferred full ownership of their beloved lake cabin on Lake Travis to his mother, Beatrice, for the nominal sum of $1. It was a textbook fraudulent conveyance, a desperate and transparent attempt to strip the real estate from the marital estate before filing for divorce. He is playing a timed game, Meredith explained, leaning back as she capped her fountain pen with a sharp, definitive click. Our digital forensics show he downloaded the final divorce petition last night. He is waiting for next month, specifically the exact date you depart for your 6-week remote medical volunteer mission in the rural valleys. Audrey closed her eyes, visualizing the trap. Gavin wanted her hundreds of miles away, isolated in an area with erratic cellular service and zero legal resources, while he served her the papers, cleaned out the remainder of their physical home, and left her too overwhelmed and disconnected to fight back. He calculated that her distance would guarantee his total victory. Meredith reached across the desk, her hand surprisingly warm as she placed a firm, grounding palm over Audrey's cold fingers. He expects you to discover the affair, lose your temper, and confront him. Anger makes people careless, Audrey. Arrogance will make him blind. Right now, he believes you are completely oblivious. We are going to keep it that way. What do I do? Audrey whispered, her voice cracking slightly before the iron discipline of her head nurse training took over once more. You go home, Meredith instructed, her gaze fierce and unwavering. You look him in the eye, you eat the dinner he cooks, and you play the part of the tired, overworked, invisible wife. Let him believe his execution is flawless. While he plays his short game, we will quietly surround the entire battlefield. Audrey stood up, smoothing the wrinkles of her faded scrubs. The weight of the folder in her bag felt heavy, but for the first time in years, she felt a dangerous, quiet clarity taking root within her soul. The invisible wife was about to become Gavin's most formidable investigator. The night air inside the Miller household was thick and suffocating, smelling heavily of the lavender-scented fabric softener Audrey had meticulously chosen, overlaid with the sharp, acidic aroma of the grilled salmon Gavin had prepared for dinner. The house was unnaturally quiet, save for the rhythmic, low hum of the central air conditioning unit, keeping the indoor temperature at a freezing 18 degrees Celsius, 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Audrey sat at the edge of the pristine kitchen island, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug of chamomile tea. The heat radiating from the mug was the only source of comfort in the room, contrasting sharply with the coldness that seemed to seep from the granite countertops. Gavin stood nearby, leaning casually against the doorframe, swirling the remaining dark crimson liquid in his wine glass. His posture was the definition of relaxed elegance, a sharp contrast to Audrey's slouched, exhausted frame. If you weren't constantly working night shifts, Audrey, and actually put some effort into your appearance like other wives do, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for balance, Gavin said, his tone smooth, conversational, and entirely devoid of guilt. He sighed, a soft, patronizing sound, as he took a slow sip of the expensive Cabernet. I'm just trying to keep this family afloat while you bury yourself in the emergency room. You've become entirely detached. In the past, those words would have acted as a slow-acting poison, filling Audrey's chest with a familiar, crushing weight of inadequacy. She would have apologized, swallowed her tears, and promised to try harder, believing that the fractures in her marriage were entirely her fault. But tonight, the gaslighting hit a solid wall. Audrey kept her gaze lowered, staring at the swirling amber liquid in her mug, but beneath the surface, tectonic plates of her consciousness shifted. The fog of years of emotional manipulation dissolved instantly. She looked at Gavin, really looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see a husband demanding affection. She saw a calculated adversary projecting his own moral failures onto her. A profound epiphany washed over her, cold and clear. I am not a victim of his malice. I am a victim of my own unreciprocated sacrifice. I built the pedestal he stands on, and I am the only one who can pull it down. She stopped mourning the 18 years of loyalty she had lost. The era of internal crying and silent pleading was over. Right then, she took full, unyielding accountability for her own future happiness. The next morning, the physical manifestation of her transformation began. The sterile fluorescent lighting of a high-end salon downtown hummed overhead, smelling of sweet argan oil, sharp chemical hair dyes, and fresh espresso. Audrey sat in the plush leather chair, watching her reflection in the massive, brightly lit mirror. For years, she had kept her hair in a long, neglected, and faded knot, a practical choice for long hospital shifts, but a symbol of her self-effacing lifestyle. Cut it all off, Audrey told the stylist, her voice steady, carrying the quiet authority of an ER nurse managing a trauma bay. The sharp, metallic snip-snip of the heavy shears echoed near her ears. With every large chunk of hair that hit the polished, white floor, Audrey felt a physical weight lifting from her shoulders. When the stylist finished, a different woman stared back from the mirror. Her new hair was a sharp, asymmetrical bob that grazed her jawline, accentuating the high cheekbones and determined set of her mouth that had long been hidden by exhaustion. Leaving the salon, Audrey bypassed the section of her closet filled with oversized, shapeless medical scrubs and faded cotton hoodies. She walked into a boutique, the air smelling of new leather and high-quality wool. She selected 3 sharply tailored blazers, 1 navy, 1 charcoal, 1 structured cream, along with crisp white button-downs and a pair of elegant, dark leather heels. When she stepped out onto the sunny Austin pavement, the weight of the new fabric against her skin felt like a suit of modern armor. Her stride was longer, her chin held higher. She was no longer hiding. But the upgrade wasn't merely cosmetic, it was deeply methodical. Every afternoon, locked inside her private office at the hospital, the soft clack-clack of Audrey's keyboard replaced the sounds of her grief. Using a secure, newly established personal account that Gavin had no visibility over, she began her education in forensic financial tracking. She pored over digital banking laws, teaching herself the nuances of asset management. She documented every single phone call, capturing the timestamps and verifying the inconsistencies in Gavin's narratives. With the precision of a scientist, she mapped out a sprawling, chronological timeline on an encrypted digital spreadsheet. Columns of data detailed the exact dates, times, and routing numbers of every single dollar Gavin had funneled out of their lives into Miller Legacy LLC. Every text message he sent promising he was at a client dinner was cross-referenced with the automated toll tag logs of his luxury SUV, mapping his actual locations. She was no longer just surviving her days. She was actively, strategically engineering her freedom. The invisible wife had stepped out of the shadows, and every action she took was a brick laid in the foundation of her own sovereignty. The air inside the private hospital conference room was heavy with the sharp, clinical smell of rubbing alcohol and the warm, roasted aroma of premium espresso brewing in the corner. Through the double-paned glass windows, the distant hum of the Austin traffic droned on, punctuated occasionally by the sharp, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor echoing from the hallway. Audrey stood by the window, her new asymmetrical bob framing a face that had completely shed its former exhaustion. She wore her new structured charcoal blazer, the fabric crisp and smooth under her fingertips, a stark contrast to the loose, shapeless scrubs she had lived in for years. A light, hurried knock dispersed the silence, and the door swung open. Sienna Taylor stepped into the room, bringing with her a cloud of expensive floral perfume and the confident, clicking rhythm of high leather heels. As a pharmaceutical representative, Sienna was used to owning whatever room she walked into. She adjusted the strap of her designer handbag, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in Audrey's transformed appearance. "Audrey," Sienna began, her voice tight, defensive, and dripping with calculated politeness as she took a seat at the long oval table. "Your administrative assistant said this was an urgent meeting regarding our quarterly drug distribution contracts. I didn't realize it was a personal matter. If this is about Gavin, let me save you the breath. He told me everything. I know you two are legally separated, and I know you've been refusing to leave the house, dragging out his life out of pure spite." Audrey didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice, nor did she let a single flicker of anger disrupt the calm expression on her face. Instead, she walked slowly toward the table, the quiet authority of an ER nurse managing a critical trauma wing radiating from every step. She pulled out a chair directly across from Sienna and sat down. "I didn't bring you here to talk about my marriage, Sienna," Audrey said, her voice a calm, steady alto that instantly cut through the younger woman's defensive armor. "I brought you here to talk about a business transaction." With a smooth, deliberate motion, Audrey reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder. She slid it across the polished wood of the table. The sharp friction of paper against wood was the only sound in the room. Sienna glanced at the folder, a smirk playing on her lips. "I don't need to look at your emotional grievances." "It's not a grievance. It's a financial ledger," Audrey replied, quietly. "Open it." Curiosity, tinged with a sudden flicker of unease, overcame Sienna's hesitation. Her manicured fingers flipped the cover open. The bright, white sheets inside were covered in dense columns of bank statements, corporate registry filings, and digital transaction receipts. "Look at the second page," Audrey directed, her voice dropping into a chillingly objective cadence. "That is the corporate charter for Miller Legacy LLC, a shell company registered in Delaware. Gavin is the primary shareholder. But look at the secondary credit cards attached to the commercial account. One of them is issued under your name." Sienna's smirk vanished. The color began to drain from her cheeks, leaving her skin looking pale under the harsh fluorescent lights of the conference room. He gave me that card for our travel expenses." For our future home. He gave you that card because every dollar you spend on it is written off as a corporate expense, allowing his shell company to evade federal taxes while systematically bleeding my marital savings, Audrey explained, her tone entirely clinical. But that's not why you're going to read the third page. Audrey watched as Sienna's eyes scanned the next document. It was a certified billing statement from a luxury jewelry boutique in Dallas, dated just 5 days ago. A secondary transaction receipt showed a substantial charge made on that exact same corporate account, the purchase of a custom Tiffany diamond engagement ring. Appended to the receipt was a FedEx tracking log, confirming the package had been shipped and signed for at a residential address in Dallas. The recipient was a prominent real estate attorney, a different woman. The silence in the room became absolute, suffocatingly heavy. The only sound was the ragged, uneven breath escaping from Sienna's lips as the reality of the documents crashed over her like a tidal wave. The expensive floral perfume suddenly felt cloying, masking the bitter taste of betrayal. She stared at the paper, her fingers trembling so violently that the page rattled against the table. He told me I was the only one, Sienna whispered, her voice cracking as a single, heavy tear threatened to smudge her makeup. He swore he was finalizing the paperwork to marry me the moment your volunteer mission started. You were never his future, Sienna. You were his tax shield and his alibi, Audrey said, her gaze fixed on the younger woman, devoid of malice but filled with an unyielding weight. He used my trust to steal from me, and he used your vanity to hide the money. And while he was promising you a life, he was already designing his next escape with someone else in Dallas. Sienna looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of intense humiliation and rising fury. The arrogance she had walked into the room with had evaporated entirely, replaced by the sharp, burning clarity of a woman who realized she had been thoroughly played. She looked at Audrey, seeing not a broken, invisible wife, but a master strategist who held all the cards. "What do you want from me?" Sienna asked, her teeth clenched, her voice shaking with an anger that was no longer directed at Audrey. "I don't want your apologies, and I don't want your tears," Audrey said, leaning forward, her presence filling the space between them. "I want your cooperation. My attorney, Meredith Vance, needs the encryption codes to the private digital drive Gavin set up on your personal laptop for his LLC communications. Turn them over. Agree to testify as a surprise witness when the time comes, and I will ensure your name is kept out of the federal fraud reporting." Sienna stared at the diamond ring receipt, her knuckles turning white as she balled her hands into fists. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the last remnants of her allegiance to Gavin shattering into dust. "He kept the master spreadsheet on my cloud drive," Sienna said, her voice dropping into a hard, cold register that matched Audrey's own. "I'll give you everything. Every email, every hidden account, every single lie he thought he buried." Audrey closed the folder with a firm, satisfying snap. The B2B alliance was forged. The invisible wife had just stripped Gavin of his most valuable asset, and the chessboard was now entirely under her control. The air inside the sterile, windowless legal conference room in downtown Austin felt artificially frozen and heavily compressed, thick with the chemical, biting scent of dry-cleaned wool, expensive leather briefcases, and the faint, sweet trace of a lemon-scented cleaning solution. High above the long, reflective mahogany table, rows of fluorescent lights hummed in a continuous, maddening vibration, casting a flat, unforgiving glare on everyone present. In the far corner of the room, a court reporter sat perfectly motionless, her fingers hovering like spiders over the keys of a stenotype machine, waiting to transform every spoken word into an unalterable public record. Gavin Miller leaned back in his leather chair, the smooth, expensive fabric of a custom-tailored navy suit rustling softly with his movements. He looked entirely at ease, radiating the casual, unshakable confidence of a certified financial planner who spent his life manipulating numbers and commanding boardrooms. He flashed a smooth, rehearsed smile across the table, his gold watch catching the harsh overhead light as he casually adjusted his silk tie. Sitting next to him, Audrey remained absolutely still, a quiet storm in her structured charcoal blazer. Her new asymmetrical bob was sharp and precise, framing a face that was completely unreadable. Gavin briefly met her eyes, a flicker of patronizing pity dancing in his gaze. He still truly believed he was dealing with the exhausted, invisible wife who could easily be outmaneuvered. The deposition began with the monotonous, rhythmic scratching of pens and the formal, dry questioning from Gavin's legal counsel regarding standard corporate filings, joint checking accounts, and routine tax declarations. Gavin answered each query with polished fluency, his voice a warm, reassuring baritone that had successfully lulled countless clients into a state of blind trust. Then, Meredith Vance stood up. The rustle of her sharp pantsuit cut through the room's low hum like a razor blade. She adjusted her silver-rimmed glasses, her eyes locking onto Gavin with the cold, calculating precision of an executioner. "Mr. Miller," Meredith began, her voice a steady, resonant alto that seemed to drop the room's temperature by several degrees. "Under penalty of perjury, and reminding you that you are under an absolute oath to the court, I ask you directly, during the past 12 months, have you ever engaged in any romantic or sexual relationships outside of your marriage?" Gavin didn't even blink. He let out a soft, dramatic sigh, shaking his head with a perfectly executed look of exhausted exasperation. "Absolutely not. My private life has been entirely dedicated to supporting my wife through her erratic hospital schedule. Our marriage has faced challenges, but I have remained completely faithful." "And do you recognize the name Emily Carter or Sienna Taylor?" Meredith continued, her tone chillingly objective. Gavin cleared his throat, a faint, barely perceptible tightness forming at the corner of his jaw. "Sienna Taylor is a professional acquaintance, a pharmaceutical representative connected to my wife's medical center. I have never socialized with her outside of standard networking events. I do not know anyone by the other name." The court reporter's machine chattered rhythmically, capturing the lie in real time. Meredith didn't argue. With a calm, deliberate motion, she opened her briefcase and extracted a dense stack of high-resolution financial documents and digital forensics reports. The crisp snap of the papers hitting the mahogany table sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. "Let us examine the corporate ledger of Miller Legacy LLC, a company you established in Delaware 8 months ago," Meredith said, sliding the first sheet across the polished wood. "You swore under oath 10 minutes ago that this entity was created solely for independent commercial consulting. Can you explain why this anonymous entity routinely authorized monthly payments totaling exactly $186,000 from your marital savings account?" Gavin's smile faltered, a sudden sheen of sweat forming just below his hairline. "Those were routine asset reallocations, standard high-yield portfolio adjustments. I don't recall the specific operational details off the top of my head." "You don't recall?" Meredith's voice was sharp. She slid another document forward, a certified billing history from a custom construction firm on Lake Travis. "Then perhaps you can recall these 6 separate electronic invoices, totaling over $140,000 for premium kitchen remodels and a custom deepwater dock at the Burnett County Lake Cabin. Every invoice carries your encrypted digital signature, and every invoice was paid by Miller Legacy LLC right before you transferred ownership of that exact cabin to your mother, Beatrice, for the sum of $1 single dollar." Gavin shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the leather groaning beneath him. The smooth veneer of his confidence was rapidly chipping away, revealing a panicked, cornered animal underneath. He looked toward his attorney, but his counsel was staring intently at the floor, rubbing his forehead in silence. I am a financial planner, Gavin stammered, his voice losing its warm resonance, turning thin and reedy. It was a standard estate planning gift to my family. It was a tax-efficient strategy. I don't recall the exact timing. You don't recall the timing, and you don't recall the women, Meredith stated, a dangerous smile touching her lips. Let the record show that the deponent has stated, under oath, that he has had 0 external romantic relationships. Now, pursuant to Texas rules of civil procedure, I am calling a vital corporate and character witness who has been formally subpoenaed to this deposition. Meredith turned toward the heavy oak door of the conference room and nodded. The door swung open with a heavy, definitive creak. The sudden influx of air brought the sharp, recognizable scent of premium floral perfume into the room. Sienna Taylor walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood perimeter of the room with a hard, military precision. She was dressed in a pristine white blazer, her expression cold, unyielding, and completely detached from the man she had been kissing just weeks prior. Gavin's face turned instantly, violently white, the blood draining from his lips until they were a sickly gray. He gasped, his mouth opening slightly, but no sound came out. Sienna walked straight to the empty chair at the end of the table, never once looking at Gavin with anything other than pure disdain. She placed a thumb drive directly in front of the court reporter. "My name is Sienna Taylor," she said, her voice clear, steady, and amplified by the dead silence of the room. "I am here to turn over the master server logs and private email communications of Miller Legacy LLC, which Gavin Miller stored on my personal cloud drive. I am also here to testify that Mr. Miller repeatedly stated his marriage was legally finalized and that he used my name to open secondary commercial credit cards to fund his lifestyle." Sienna turned her head, looking Gavin dead in the eye, her voice dropping a chilling truth that broke the final piece of his composure. "And I am here to state on the record that while he was promising me a wedding, he was actively using these same defrauded marital funds to buy an engagement ring for a third woman in Dallas." Gavin's attorney dropped his heavy metal pen, the loud, resonant clang echoing off the walls. The court reporter paused for the first time all morning, her eyes widening slightly as she looked at the deponent. Gavin looked at the papers, then at Sienna, and finally at Audrey. Audrey didn't smile. She simply sat there, magnificent and immovable, watching him drown in the sea of his own recorded lies. The master financial planner had completely run out of explanations, and the trap he had designed for his wife had just snapped shut on his own neck. The sweltering Austin summer eventually yielded to the crisp, amber clarity of early autumn. Inside the Bell County Courthouse, the heavy oak double doors muffled the hum of the city outside, enclosing a space that smelled of old wood, floor polish, and the cold, unyielding finality of the law. Sitting at the plaintiff's table, Audrey adjusted the cuffs of her structured cream blazer. The fabric felt cool against her skin, a clean slate representing the new life she had meticulously engineered. When Judge Eleanor Watkins delivered the final ruling, her voice was a calm, resonant gavel of truth that echoed through the high-ceilinged courtroom. The justice served was absolute and methodical. The court declared the transfer of the Burnett County Lake Cabin to Beatrice Miller for $1, a transparent, fraudulent conveyance, instantly voiding the deed and reverting the property to the marital estate. Gavin was ordered to fully reimburse the liquidated $186,000 from the joint savings, completely restore every single cent of the $529 college savings plan for Audrey's niece, and cover all of Audrey's extensive legal fees due to his severe misconduct and perjury during discovery. But the real seismic shift occurred outside the family court. Meredith Vance had already forwarded the certified deposition transcripts, and the Delaware Shell LLC server logs straight to the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, FINRA, and the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. The financial empire Gavin had so arrogantly built crumbled to dust within weeks. He was permanently stripped of his certified financial planner license, barred from the financial industry for life, and forced to move into a cramped, noisy one-bedroom apartment outside Temple. Meanwhile, Beatrice and Walter Miller found themselves trapped in a grueling, aggressive federal tax evasion audit, their bank accounts frozen as the IRS picked apart their assets. Yet, Audrey's truest victory lay not in the destruction of her enemies, but in the elevation of those who stood by her. Using a portion of her court-awarded equalization settlement, Audrey sat down with Meredith to craft a brilliant, legally airtight solution for Camila Santos. Instead of a direct financial gift that would trigger heavy U.S. gift tax penalties or violate banking privacy laws, Audrey established a structured, long-term family trust that hired Camila as a fully independent household administrator. The trust issued a lump sum advance payment directly to the financial institution holding Camila's mortgage, completely liquidating the debt. When Audrey handed Camila the official notary-stamped deed of trust showing her home was owned free and clear, the older woman wept, the tears splashing onto the crisp paper. It was a triumph of pure kindness, engineered with the sharpest legal intellect. 6 months later, the transition was complete. Audrey had officially been appointed as the director of nursing at the Austin Medical Center. Her days were still demanding, but she no longer moved through the hospital as a shadow. She was a leader, her voice respected, her presence commanding. On a breathtaking late Saturday afternoon, Audrey stood on the wooden deck of a small river cruise boat, drifting lazily down Lady Bird Lake along the Colorado River. The weather was magnificent. A gentle, cool breeze swept over the water, carrying the faint, sweet scent of blooming cedar and the rich aroma of roasted coffee beans from the lakeside cafes. The sky was in brilliant canopy of violet and indigo, but it was the water that held her gaze. The setting sun washed the surface of the river in a deep, shimmering coat of molten gold and warm orange, the ultimate golden hour. Audrey closed her eyes, letting the cool spray of the river mist touch her face. She took a deep, unrestricted breath, feeling her lungs expand fully, free of the suffocating weight that had crushed her chest for years. She thought of Gavin. To her own surprise, she felt no burning anger, no residual bitterness, and absolutely no desire for vengeance. The intense hatred had evaporated, replaced by a profound, beautiful indifference. He was no longer her tormentor. He had simply become a stranger, entirely invisible in the grand landscape of her mind. The truth had spoken for itself, and in doing so, it had dissolved the chains of her past. Audrey opened her eyes and watched the golden light dance across the ripples of the Colorado River. Her new asymmetrical bob blew softly in the wind. She lifted her chin, a serene, triumphant smile gracing her lips. The invisible wife was gone forever. In her place stood a woman entirely free, deeply proud, and fiercely sovereign over her own beautiful, unwritten future. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. Please like, share, and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Hope to see you on the next page.